Alright, so he doesn't really look all that menacing, especially with all this pink happening here. So you know what I can do is if I want to sample a color that's being used inside my live paint group here, what I could do is hold down the Alt key, and that switches me to my eyedropper tool. So I'm just holding down Alt or Option on the Mac, and I could go and sample my yellow here, for example, and then use that to fill in some of these other areas here. So I'm just going to quickly finish this off here. Maybe I'll also throw in maybe a different shade of blue to kind of finish this off. Something like that. Okay, looking good. Good enough. Now, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. These guys are looking pretty good. Hope you like them. Now, what about his actual chest area? Well, first of all, let me show you a couple of things here. I'm going to go and sample the gray that I had used in his arms. I'm just holding down Alt here and clicking on the PC or Option on the Mac. Now, here's where things get a little bit tricky. You can see here that the paths are open. They're open, so they don't close. There's nothing to keep the paint from spilling out, sort of like the example we had earlier with his ear up here, his left ear. So if I single click in here, you can see the red frame, by the way, on the outside of my live paint group. When I single click here, the entire background fills. That is not what I want. So there's a couple of ways to fix this here. The same, of course, is going to happen if I try and click anywhere inside here as well. The same thing happens. So there's a couple of things that I can do. Probably the most straightforward thing to do, I'm going to switch back to my black arrow tool and I'll highlight my live paint group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand my live paint group. What does that mean? Well, that means that it's no longer live paint. It is now one single Illustrator object. So now that I've done that, and everything's grouped, by the way, so if I want, I could go and ungroup as much as I want there. I'm going to leave everything grouped, though. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to my pen tool, and I'll just zoom in really close here. And I'll start down here in the bottom right, and I'll just quickly create a path here, and I'll do this very, very quickly here, just to give you an idea. Something like this, and essentially what I'm going to do is create one big massive block. There it is there, filling in. You know what I do sometimes, by the way, too, while I'm doing this, because I'm getting this fill happening here, is I'll just hit Shift X, and what that does is switches the fill color and the stroke color. So my stroke was none and my fill was gray. I hit Shift X, that flipped the two. Now I'm not getting this sort of ugly fill getting in my way as I'm working along creating this path here. And I'm just going all the way down here, all the way down his side. And again, I'm not being as careful as I should be here, but I want something like this, and then I want to reconnect it all the way over on the right-hand side where I started, something like this. I'll zoom out a little bit, something like that. I will switch my fill and stroke color, Shift X, switch back to my black arrow tool, and then I'm going to take this object and send it all the way to the back just by using Control Shift open square bracket or Command Shift open square bracket. Now, it didn't really work. Well, let's see what's going on. I'm going to click back on my group here, and I'm going to do some ungrouping. I said that everything was grouped together here, so I'm going to start doing some ungrouping. And I only had to ungroup once. Ungroup's grayed out, so there was only one group there. And I'll zoom out just a little bit more. And what is this right here? Oh, there appears to be a white object there. How do I know it's there? Well, I can see that it's filled with white right there. So if I delete that, there's my gray fill that I just put on my Berserk robot's chest. So that's pretty cool. Now, what I could do from here is I could come along and grab any of these other shapes here. These are all just regular Illustrator objects now, these little rectangles here in his arms. And maybe what I'll do is I'll grab my eyedropper tool on my toolbox, and I'll sample that darker gray color that I had used earlier, something like this. And then the last thing that I'll do is I will create one more object using my pen tool for the inside of his chest here. So I'm just going to hit the P key on my keyboard, and then very, very quickly here, I should be zoomed in a little bit closer, but I'm just going to do this quickly here. Quickly trace around this shape here. Do you remember the keyboard shortcut to flip my fill and my stroke? It's Shift X, Shift X. And then I'll just continue my path all the way along here. Something like this. Very lovely. All right. grab my black arrow tool, Shift X to flip my stroke back to the fill. I'll move this guy all the way to the back, Control Shift open square bracket or Command Shift open square bracket, and then I will take this fella right here, this guy that I had just created, this gray fill that I just created, and send him all the way to the back. Check that out. That is one berserk-looking robot. Now, there's two other robots inside your lesson file folder, which I've given you. You can open those guys up, run the live trace on them, and color them in as well. So there's how you can use your live trace and your live paint to begin painting and coloring in some of your hand drawings here in Illustrator CS3.